All right. Well, welcome to everyone who's joined us for another episode of Innovative Locations, where we at ARCO have candid conversations with our partners about cool and innovative things that they're doing in real estate. I'm your host, Eden Ames, and I'm very glad to have with us today the visionary entrepreneur Will Dean, whose previous work includes co-founding the team-based obstacle race Tough Mudder, and today he's the co-founder and CEO of Electric Gamebox. Electric Gamebox has seen proven success in the UK, and Arco Murray has been really lucky and excited to be partnering with them as they're expanding to the US. We're currently bringing to fruition locations across the US from California, Colorado, Illinois, Georgia, Texas, Utah, and Virginia. So big rollout plan. And presently, Electric Gamebox has just one location in Dallas, Texas. Will, thanks so much for joining us today. Can you give us the quick elevator pitch and just tell us, for those who don't know, what is Electric Gamebox?
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on today. I really appreciate it. So what is Electric Gamebox? Well, we produce an interactive smart room. So a game box is an 11 foot by 11 foot space where you and your friends can be part of this room that's interactive. So you wear a tracker on your head and it follows you around the room, and the walls have touch sensors in them, and we have projection on all the walls. And we talk about it being immersive group gaming, and we talk about reinventing the video game and making screen time social. And the idea is that you step into the video game. You're not just playing the video game on a screen. You and your friends are part of the video game, and we take people on a journey together.
Cool. So can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration for this?
Yes, of course. So a couple of years ago, I think about 3 or 4 years now, I started to see the development of escape rooms and also location-based VR. And at the time, I was starting to think about what I would do next. It was time for a new challenge as an entrepreneur. And everybody was saying, here's all this kind of cool new stuff. And it was very clear that the retail environment was changing, and this was before COVID, and so it was more true today than back then. And when I tried out VR, my personal view was it had a couple of big problems. The first one was the hardware was expensive, and you needed a lot of people to operate it. But more importantly, from a consumer perspective, it just wasn't that great, and it was clunky. And once you put the headset on, you're not with your friends. And that always struck me as being a big problem. And so my thinking was, I wonder if we can create this interactive smart room. And I think if we can get that right, we'll be able to build a whole bunch of different games. And some people say it's very different from your last business, Tough Mudder. Essentially, it's pretty similar. It's all about creating team challenges and getting people to do things as a group. And in my career, I've always tried to focus on creating things that bring people together, and this idea of collective achievement and kind of shared memories. So that was the inspiration. We built back in 2018 a really simple prototype. We took the video game Pong, literally the simplest video game you can think of, and you had 2 players running up and down in a room, and where they were controlled where the paddles were. And it was super basic, but it was kind of fun, and that was enough to kind of convince me that we had something there.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's interesting because when I first read about it, I also kind of had that reaction of, is it similar? Is it VR? And also, It seems like VR has been sort of this trend. We saw a lot of them come up and crop up. And I'll be honest, I haven't tracked how well that industry has done. So I'm curious about maybe some of the analytical side of deciding on this concept. Was there something about VR where you're like, you know what, there is staying power and it just needs to be modified to be better? Was there any of that?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. I mean, the kind of the MBA in me kind of hopefully did a bit of the kind of analytical work of saying, right, what are the issues here? And as I saw it, you had a couple of issues. The hardware was really expensive. It actually needs a lot of people to operate it. You need a bunch of people watching everyone doing the VR because things go wrong all the time. And then the other big challenge they have is creating new content is really expensive. And so from a business perspective, I was trying to solve those problems because I could see that the desire to do things that get people out of the house, things that bring people together, activities that aren't just passive or involve eating or drinking, it's something that we all want more of. And so I could see the opportunity I just needed to figure out what's the way to go after it that will also drive, that will have strong economics and drive repeat business. So that was the sort of the business side of me. The part of me that just likes doing fun stuff, it's like, oh, this will be fun. This is by getting people together, and we're kind of reinventing what a video game is and how people think about interacting with it. And we live in this slightly weird age where we all thought technology was going to bring us together, and unfortunately, I hope I'm not saying anything too controversial, right? It turns out it hasn't been the unifying force we all hoped it would be, and actually, in some ways, it's kind of driven us apart. And I like the idea of using technology to bring people together. My kids are young, and so they still want to spend time with my wife and I. But I live in fear of this day where they become teenagers and Dad, you're so uncool, it's so boring. And something we hear all the time from our customers, particularly families, is it's so difficult to find something that everyone can enjoy. Yeah. And this is something that everyone can enjoy.
Yeah. So how many game boxes are there in a location, and how many players do you see coming through and playing a game at once?
So it varies a bit, but typically you have about 10 game boxes on a site. So you have a check-in area, like a reception area with lockers and that sort of stuff, and then you've got 10 identical rooms. And so most people book online. You get some walk up, but most people book online. And you'd arrive and say, "Hey, I'm Eden," and they'd say, "Great, yeah, you're in room 2." And you take your coats and drop the bags off, and then you're into the room. And then experiences are typically 30 to 60 minutes long, and you have 2 to 6 people in the room. And the focus on the games is always about getting the team to work together. So it's never player versus player. Mm-hmm. It's always group versus environment. So, for example, in one of our most recent games, which is Psychedelic Mansion, it's based on, very loosely, I should add, on a 1960s CIA training exercise. And the idea is you've got to make your way through this mansion. And you keep opening different doors and going into different rooms. And in each room, there's a challenge. And the idea is to get through as many rooms as you can. But you have to work together as a team, either to solve problems or to communicate information or to pass pieces of a puzzle between each other, that kind of stuff. So that's sort of what the experience entails. And we have a bunch of different games, some of which are kind of more choose your own adventure style, some of them are more kind of like general challenge, some of them are kind of more like arcade classics, and you can go online and you book in advance as to which one you want to do.
Yeah, I was just thinking how you brought up an arcade, and it does kind of sound like arcade style but group oriented, and I am also wondering about your comments on choosing not to make these competitive. Do you think that'll change ever, or do you think that it'll always be this more collaborative thing? Because from a business perspective, you could theoretically, model it as if. We see so many people who get so competitive in things like video games, right? And there's a huge amount of audience that gets pulled from that, and now it's being monetized. And then on the flip side, you do something more team-oriented, and you maybe see corporate groups and that sort of thing, team building being more of the focus. Do you think that, are you very narrowly focused on that latter audience over the competition, or will that change?
It's a great question. So first things first, competitive people always find ways to make anything competitive, anything. And we see this with our games. It is even when the game is like you've got to try and get as many coins as a group. It's still like, well, who got the most coins for the group? So, and we've seen when we've done some testing, you've got up to 6 people in quite a small room, locked in there for an hour. Not actually locked in there, but you're in there for an hour. And if you create a situation where you can kind of blast someone on your own team, with certain personality types, it can kind of get a bit too competitive too quickly. That said, we are now starting to experiment with games where it's room versus room. But we try and keep within the group. We think the secret sauce of what we're doing is this idea that everyone's working together. And we really celebrate the high five moments that kind of come along every 10 seconds, that you as a group have done something well. And it's not that we're anti anti-competition. We used to say, "Tough Mudder, it's not a race, it's a challenge." And somebody once said, "I think that's un-American." I said, "Well, I am. It's true. It's a fact." But we're not at all anti-competition. We just think it's like a lot of fun to be having, creating something where everyone's working together. But the truth is, the variety of content we have now is very wide. So we have short format games where you kind of leap straight in. We have puzzle-based games, where it's very much about kind of solve problems together. Quiz-based games. So we're launching later this year some educational content, which is designed for kids between the ages of 7 and 11 to be taken on a journey. And the first one will be a tour around Europe, but we're also going to be creating tours around the US and historical tours and this kind of stuff. So the idea is that children can choose which city they go to next, and they're sort of making their way around Europe and learning about facts and stuff about different cities and collecting points and moving on. So we're very much about this kind of like group-based journey, and I'm sure many of the people who are watching today are very well aware that half the TED Talks will tell you, if you want to be happier, right, don't buy more expensive stuff, like do things with your friends, right? Shared memories, shared experiences are the new luxury good. I really believe that, and they make you happier. And we're all about shared experience of feeling like you did something together. And I should point out, when we talk about teamwork, right, if you're playing in a team sport, right, there's a team that you're on, right, but there's another team you're trying to beat. It's not like we're against the competition, but we like this idea of like together we're working to achieve something.
Yeah, that's great. I am also wondering about how you're perceiving your audience. So earlier I mentioned like corporate outings come to mind as being an example of where a team-oriented, collaborative activity would be really appealing. But then also families, like you're saying. Do you find that you're segmenting your audience that way, especially, like as you're developing new games? I'm wondering about the creative process there, and then how you think about the audience. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So what we see at the weekends in particular is during the day, our power users are families, particularly families with kids in the ages of 10 and 16. We were all that age once, right? That awkward age where you're old enough to kind of want to do your own thing, but not yet old enough to do your own thing. And parents will always tell us that it's just hard to find things to do with teenagers. And one of the things that we're very proud of on that front, which we didn't see coming at all, is that we've turned out to be incredibly popular with families that have autistic children. And they'll tell us that it's very, very hard to find something, particularly if they have one autistic child and one child that isn't autistic. They're very, very hard to find something the whole family can enjoy. And we're really proud of that. I don't pretend we're curing cancer, but I do believe we make a positive difference to people's lives. So on weekends during the day, a lot of families, of course, we're now entering into school holidays. So, that kind of continues through the week at this time of the year. And then what we find on weekday evenings is we do get a lot of corporate team bonding. People who are drawn to this idea of we're doing something together that is more than just like drinking together, and there is this real sense of having to work together as a team and trust each other and communicate together. And at the end of it, there's a league table and finance can sit, they beat marketing and that kind of stuff, which sort of all adds to the fun of it as well. And then what we've also seen on the evenings particularly a weekend on Friday and Saturdays, we get a lot of young urban professionals. We get adult birthday parties, bachelor parties, as we would call them, hen and stag do's in the UK. And that's been a big part of our market. And it's worth understanding that in the experience itself, all of the kind of the expensive technology sits up in the ceiling. It's all mounted up in the ceiling. So even if you get a group of guys in that are being a bit boisterous on a Saturday evening, there's nothing for them to break. We put the visors on people, and that's about it. And I remember going to a location-based VR experience in LA as part of my research, and there were a family there, and they brought with them one of their kids, their little boy, who I guess would be like 8 to 10 years old. And the mother turned to the little boy as they were sort of putting on their headsets and the other gear that you need, and it takes a while to kind of get geared up for VR. And she said, "Be careful, don't break it, it's expensive. And if you're 9 years old, you may as well be told, I told you we were going to have fun, but I didn't really mean it. Right? And so I really like the idea that with our thing, you literally put on one of the visors, and it takes 2 seconds. You're in the room, you have a minute of instructions and safety briefing, and literally a minute, and then you're playing, and you're straight in. And that was very important to me as well, because when I went to the location-based VR, what I saw is those 50 minutes of getting ready, 10 minutes of playing, and then 10 minutes of kind of taking it all off again.
Right.
And that didn't seem like a great ratio to me.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. It's very astute to notice those kinds of things as an experience detractor, saying to your kid, don't break this thing. So I'm wondering more about the game development. Do you have the same set of games at each location? And then how often do you find yourself updating games? Are you updating the existing? Are you creating new ones?
Yes. So we build most of our games in-house. We have an in-house studio that develops games. We also work with some third parties to create content, and we're very big on rapid prototyping. Learn quickly, fail fast. And so, if we're thinking about building a game, we typically will build an early stage prototype in the morning. So one developer will build it. We work in a game engine called Unity, which means you can do a lot of things quite quickly, and we have our own software development kit that we developed, our SDK that sits above it, the technical stuff. But what that means is we can actually build stuff very, very quickly. So we'll build a super simple prototype, like the Pong game I was describing, in a morning, and then we'll play it. And if we think it's fun, we'll say, great, let's build a proper prototype that we can bring some people in to play. And it's still pretty basic. Even we've got some clunky graphics and only 1 or 2 levels. But we'll very quickly get users' feedback from that. The walls, as I mentioned, have touch sensors in them, so you can do Uber style 5-star ratings, and you can ask people questions about what they liked and didn't like, and that feedback is really helpful. And then we will typically aim to bring out a new game pretty much every month, and some of those games will be focused on come in, play one game 30 minutes, have fun. Others are much more narrative based, like the CIA training based exercise. I talked about. We're just about to launch a game where you've got to guide a rabbit around this kind of magical kingdom. It's sort of loosely sort of Alice in Wonderland based, and you've got to collect all these cards as you're going, and that's really designed to feel like we're taking you on an adventure. And then other ones which are very popular for team bonding, it's very much like come in, play some games. Yes, there's a story. One of our popular games is called Alien Attitude Test, and it's set in 80s London, and aliens have taken over the world and they're grading all humans. And at the end of it, you get a grade between A+ and B-, and based on how you did in the game. So there's a real mix, and we see that. Of course, we do quite a lot of customer insights. We look at what do we think will work with different groups. But we're also big believers that you can't always predict the future, and it's best to just try a few things and then see what works, and accept not everything will, and that's okay. I always tell my team, remember, the only failure is if you don't learn anything. When we were at school many years ago now, high school, we did experiments as part of chemistry or science or whatever. You'd be told that you have your hypothesis and the experiment is successful. It either proves or disproves the hypothesis. So as long as there's learning, as far as we're concerned, it's all good. So that's how we approach things. We have game designers, we also have script writers, because a lot of what we're doing is kind of narrative based. So Noah, who leads our team on that side, a very, very bright guy, went to Cambridge University, and he was part of this, at least what in the UK is this very famous acting society there called the Cambridge Footlights, and the Monty Python guys did it, for example. And he's really into script writing and produces comedy shows and stuff. So yes, we have the game designers, but we also have the creatives, because we talk a lot about this is a video game for people that a lot of our audience don't when we play video games. 70% of our tickets we sell to women, and the vast majority of those women would not identify as gamers. And the games themselves are not typical video games, right? You're not blowing the head off an alien or anything like that, right? You're working together to achieve a goal. So yes, that's a bit about our process. It's really fun,
Yeah.
And one of the things as an entrepreneur I like is kind of being able to spend at least a bit of my time thinking about that, as well as like the day-to-day of like rollout of new stores and that sort of stuff.
Right. So do you see, well, this is twofold. The first thought here is you probably have a lot of customer insights coming from the digital nature of the game, right? So
Yeah.
that's plenty helpful, I'm sure. And I'm wondering if you're tracking that from location to location, and whether there's sort of a limit of games, because I'm sure like somebody joins the game maybe, or enters the box and sees this slew of games. Do you worry about overwhelming them with too many options? And if there's a cap, do you find that you're, changing up the variation of the games based on performance?
That's right. Well, I think the parallel here is probably like Netflix, but also movie theaters, right? I mean, we've all, particularly through the pandemic, right? You go onto Netflix or something similar, and you just see this like endless choice,
Right.
and it can be a bit overwhelming. So, we're getting to a stage now, we're a year and a half into the business, where people have enough choices that we're actually starting to artificially limit the number of games available, which if you think about it is what a movie theater does.
Yep.
We at any given time, there's a handful of movies you can go and see, and that's part of our strategy to say, here's the big new game, come and play this, or come in and play this game before it ends.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, that's obviously something you'd see, particularly with theatre runs, right? When the show's coming to an end, like, this is the chance to come and see it before it ends. And so yes, that's definitely part of our strategy. Because we don't want to overwhelm people. And we see, one of the things that's really encouraging is we're seeing really high repeat rates. Like over 20% of people that come back again within 1 month, which we're really proud of.
Yeah, that's awesome. So your own background, do you have any technology inclination in your, your past career, any past life? How did you decide to pick this category of entertainment?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my backstory was for the first 5 years of my career, I was a counter-terrorism officer. So I was in the Middle East, mostly with that, working with the UK government, which was an amazing experience. Right? Funny thing to say, but really entrepreneurial, particularly after 9/11, like huge opportunity to kind of go and do new things, which I loved. And then from that, lived in the United States for many years. And came to the US to get my MBA, and then after business school, started Tough Mudder, based on this insight of most people that take part in races, like a marathon or a triathlon, they're not really racing in the classic sense of the word, right? They're really sort of doing it for themselves. Like no one who does a marathon knows where they finished overall, not really, right? They may care about their own time, but it's not like most people who do it think they're in with a chance of winning it. And so I think one thing I've always enjoyed as an entrepreneur is this sort of anthropological element of like looking and seeing what people like. Just as I was describing to you with like the little boy whose parents said, like, don't break it, and what the kid hears is don't have fun. And I started to think about what challenge came next 3 or 4 years ago. I drew up my own criteria of things that I was interested in, things that I felt would kind of work for me, given my desire. I'd been away from the UK 10 years, time to come home. And I wanted to leverage what I've done with Tough Mudder, but kind of be interesting and different enough to feel like a new challenge. I think you get a lot of entrepreneurs out there that they have the second album problem. They do something and it goes well, and then they get it into their head that they're Elon Musk, and they go and do something completely different, and it doesn't go very well. And so I was really clear. I wanted to do something that could leverage what I'd done, but it was different enough. And as I said, I could see this kind of booming desire for immersive experiences. I could see there were these huge changes in retail. I remember going to a new shopping mall in London, and half of it was restaurant. And because of course they'd realised, right, the old department stores don't drive the foot traffic anymore. And I remember thinking, this is weird, right? I mean, there is still a limit to how much food that we can eat, so at least healthily, right? And this place seems to be geared up to do nothing but try and force me to eat more. So, I looked at all that stuff, and I wanted something that I felt was kind of creative, but also an operational challenge. A lot of experience working in the States, from a remarkable country, amazing economy, amazing entrepreneurial spirit. And but it was also time for me as an Englishman to kind of come home, having been gone a long time. My parents were getting older and that kind of stuff. So you sort of put all that together, and I, as I said, right, I didn't know that this would work, but it struck me that it feels like there's an opportunity to create this interactive room.
Yeah.
And I like this idea that you could sort of take people on a journey.
Yeah.
And it'd be more interactive than like a traditional movie or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Are you movie buff? I have to ask.
No, it's a good question. Not really. I mean, it's not hugely. No, I mean, I like doing new things. I think that's sort of like, I don't know, I drive my wife bananas, and I'm always like wanting to try something new or do something new or go somewhere new. And she'd be like, can't we just have a chill weekend? So that's I've always enjoyed that. This idea of creating new experiences.
Yeah.
And each of our games really is different. I would, for me, the analogy of movies isn't a bad one, because if I said to you, have you had a cinema experience? Of course, on movie theatre. Of course, the answer to that is yes, right? But it's each movie you see is completely different, right? And it's designed for a different audience and takes you on a different emotional journey, and that's the same with our games. And I found that part really exciting.
Yeah.
There was so much you could do with it, that we can use it for kind of younger kids content. We're not quite ready to announce it yet, but we're about to announce a partnership with a major movie studio that produces a lot of kids content, and then you can create educational content and bring school kids in. Some kids are lucky enough to kind of go on tours in Europe, but most aren't, right? And so it's nice that we can do something that's it's a substitute for that.
Yeah, for sure.
I like that, and I like the idea that we're kind of putting on something for teams that bring them together and improves like team coordination and all the rest of it. So that part I really enjoy.
Yeah,
and I enjoy the storytelling part.
Yeah,
that part definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. Storytelling and experiential design, I think, are very, very related. So was it hard, I guess, as somebody who didn't have a background in technology? You have this idea, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, what do you do next? Can you tell a little bit about the backstory of having the idea to taking it to the actual location?
Well, I mean, in the very early days, and it was strange because I've kind of come from working at Tough Mudder, where you've literally got hundreds of people in the company, and suddenly it's like you on your own again, and we rented a small light warehouse space right up in North London, and London's this massive sprawling city. It goes on forever in all directions, and we needed some short-term warehouse space, and I remember going and seeing the guy, and he was like, "Why do you want this space?" And he was like, "You better not be trying to store something illegal here." And I was like, "Yeah, trust me, that's not what we're doing." And we got in a contractor, and he kind of put up some walls, and we found a couple of kind of freelance developers. We paid someone £500. It's like $700 roughly. To build this pong game for us, and we found a hardware freelancer to kind of mount some sensors and things on the wall, and it was super basic. Very, very. And the point was not to say, "Look, this is amazing." The question is does it feel like there's something there?
Sure.
But managing. I mean, part of building a company, of course, is surrounding yourself with people that know more than you and are better than you at things. And one of the things that is different working with technology people is, if I say to someone in the marketing department, "How long will it take you to write a press release?" for example, I kind of know the answer, right? Or at least I have a sense of the answer. I can say to the team, "Oh yeah, how long will it take to change that in the game?" And sometimes they'll say, "Oh, it'll take 5 minutes." And other times they'll say, "Oh, that'll take 2 weeks." And so that part's a bit unnerving.
Sure.
And it's but it's fun, and I feel like I've learned a lot. I definitely, I learn by doing. That's my style, and experimenting. and I've definitely been exposed to lots of very different personality types from my own, and having never really been at all into video gaming at all, to suddenly kind of spend time with some people, as you might imagine, some of people who are very into video gaming, and so that's been fun as well. But I always focus on trying to build businesses that I believe are inherently scalable, and of course technology is an enabler of scalability. And one of the things that's great about working with Arco Murray, and I'm not saying this to plug you, I should say to the audience that they didn't ask me to plug these guys, they just said come on and have a chat. But I think they understood right from the start the scale of our ambitions, and they understood that success for us was 1,000 venues in 5 years' time, not 10 venues in 5 years' time. And I wanted to get to a place where to scale an operational business that quickly, of course, you have to use technology not just to create the content, but also to manage the whole process. So, we know in real time if someone at one of our sites, even in Dallas, and when we're sitting in London, has not had a good time because we get the 5-star rating, and we have a message that literally pings up in our head office in London saying someone hasn't had a good time. And by the time that person's back at the front desk, it's the person on the front desk has already been alerted. So we can't fix every problem, and most of it doesn't happen very often. But we can have that conversation, and you can start seeing different venues have slightly different profiles, and you can tell in real time if the venue's having an off day for whatever reason, and that's hugely powerful. One of the things that we had to do in the pandemic was Brits weren't allowed to travel to the US for a long period of time, and so we'd signed this lease in Dallas. None of us had been there. We'd literally done like a FaceTime. We'd done a FaceTime video chat. Oh my god! That was it. We find a task rabbit and have them kind of video chat there, and then the plan had been, of course, to send some of the team out, with it being the first unit, send the team out from the UK, do the tech install, train the staff on site, and all that had to go out the window. So we built it all in the UK, all the hardware, packed it all up, shipped over to the US, found a local installer and local contractor to build the space out. We didn't know the Arco Murray team back then, but we were the local contractor, and then all the technology gets installed, and there is this kind of moment of truth. We're sitting 3,000 miles away, and they have to turn the power on so it all works. And it's this real heart-to-mouth moment of like, will it or won't it? And I'm very proud of the team that we were able to open our first venue in the US without any of us going there. And I think it's a big milestone. I mean, I wouldn't have chosen to do it that way, but necessity is the mother of all invention, right? And actually, if we weren't a tech-enabled business, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, it's a huge leap of faith. I don't know if I would be able to do something like that. It's unnerving just thinking about it. But that's awesome. And clearly, it seems like it was worth the jump just because you have so many lined up.
Definitely. I mean, the traction we've had in Dallas has been just fantastic. We're sold out every weekend, and
that's awesome.
As the world gets back on its feet, we're finding that we're busy during the week as well. People, their corporate team bonding is starting to pick up. It's still not where it was before the pandemic and I think that will take a couple more months. But the feedback's been super encouraging, really positive, and pleasingly, we found that American consumers, or at least Texan consumers, like the product as much as the Brits do.
That's awesome.
Which is good.
So if you could give us some parallels. I know you're just at the cusp of starting your U.S. presence. Comparing that to the UK, if you could give some background into how long has Electric Gamebox been around for now? How many locations do you have in the UK? And are you following similar trajectories? Is that the plan for the US? Are numbers looking stacked that way?
Where are we today? So we launched our first unit back in the end of 2019. We had a great first 4 or 5 months, and then of course we had to close. In the UK, we were forced to be closed by law for 12 months. So it was a long and frustrating time. We had a short window in the summer of 2020. We had about 2 months where we were allowed to reopen, and then everything in the UK was closed.
Yeah.
I mean, the rules were pretty strict over here for a while, and so we'd cut the ribbon on our venues in Manchester, and we have a site in Essex. Essex is, how would I describe it to an audience? Essex is to London what New Jersey is to New York. So we have a site. We have a site in Essex as well, just outside of London. And with both of them, we sort of had a bit of trading last summer, but not much else. And then we were allowed to reopen in May of this year. That's when the restrictions were eased in this country. And so for a long time, it was quite bizarre. We had 4 or 5 months where the only part of the trading business was in the United States, and none of us had been to it. So the whole thing was just a bit kind of weird. We'd be talking about all these sales numbers from Dallas, and none of us had seen it. So then we launched in the US, as I said, in December, and then in the spring of this year, we announced our partnership with Brookfield, one of the largest property companies in the world, one of the largest mall operators, a super innovative entrepreneurial group of people, which is not always the case for a company as big as those guys are, over 500 billion under management. And they saw within their mall business that the world is changing, and they need new things to bring in and bring in foot traffic. And so the conversation we had is, look, we're already giving you some pretty generous deals in terms of rent and fit out. Why don't we help you grow the business? And we said, great. So we announced an equity investment from them a little over 2 months ago now, and we're opening 10 sites initially. And if those 10 go well, we'll open another 20 with them. So that's the focus on the US is a big part of our expansion. Obviously, it's a larger market than the UK. From a real estate perspective, it's less regulated than Western Europe. The UK has the same population as California, but in the size of Massachusetts. So we have a lot of rules over here that Arco keeps saying, well, there's a lot of regulations in the States. So I was like, trust me, I'm not compared to where I'm from. And so yes, big focus in the US right now on opening more owner-operated venues, and then thereafter, of course, we look at the US and say there should be over 100 stores for us, and then we're also starting to look at expansion elsewhere in the world. So we have a concession or franchise business model, so we have a lot of inbound interest from the Middle East. Obviously, mall culture in a lot of the more developed markets in the Middle East is huge. And of course, in many of those markets, you don't have people going out and eating and drinking in the same way that you'd see in Western societies. So people are really looking for things to do. So we're looking to expand there. We've taken some of our content and mapped it to Arabic and also into some Western European languages. So international expansion will be a big part of our business as well. But yes, the medium-term focus is definitely on the US.
Yeah. So is that the goal for franchising it internationally and having franchise owners say, I want to open up a store, and having them run it, and you would give them the keys essentially to everything?
That's right. But I think it's highly likely the kind of partner we have will be, we're going to work with the biggest cinema operator in Saudi Arabia, or like the largest gym operator in Germany, versus maybe more like the McDonald's model, saying, you want to buy like one location in your hometown. Sure, that sounds good to us. So yes, we'll be looking for the right partners in those markets. But like Netflix content, right? It's relatively easy to adapt our content into other languages, right? It's we've already sort of proven that we can do that, and the US is a huge market, but we're an ambitious company, and 95% of the world doesn't live in the United States. I always point out to my team, 99% of the world doesn't live in Great Britain. So we're definitely very focused on expansion, not just in Western Europe, but in Asia and the Middle East as well.
Wow.
And I'm sure we'll add, as Brits, right, Australia and New Zealand, they're a long way away physically, but pretty close to us culturally. So I'm sure we'll add those markets in due course as well.
Yeah. Wow. That's a very big vision, and I do wish you the best on all of it. It sounds like bigger than you can imagine on in terms of like, one, you guys have only been around since 2019, and you're already talking about locations in hundreds and internationally. Do you feel like you're taking anything, I guess, from Tough Mudder experience, from your own experience, and
very much so, right? I mean, like the importance of replicability. Wherever you go in the world, people love to tell you that customers are different. Wherever you go, and I remember with Tough Mudder when we first started in the States. One of the issues we used to have at Tough Mudder was the hardest thing when finding a venue was finding enough space to park all the cars. People always say, "Oh, I know this cool venue," but it always boils down to parking lots.
Sure.
And so, one of the things we said is, let's see if we could try and encourage people to carpool, having them pay. And I remember, first event in the US, people saying, "Well, I'm telling you, Americans won't pay for car parking, parking." And I said, "Well, we'll see." And then, 3 years later, we opened in the UK. I actually started talking about in the US, we opened in the UK. And I remember some British landowners saying to me, "Well, you've obviously been in America too long, because I'm telling you, Brits won't pay for car parking." It's people love to tell you that they're different, and but the truth is, right, this is play. This is shared play, and it's something quite basic about that. Right? We're all kids, and kids around the world play in the same way.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we're ambitious for sure, right? But it's fun. One of the things, some of my best memories from Tough Mudder were, when we go and open up a new market, and the craziness of the first time we did at Tough Mudder in Dubai or in China or Australia, and it's fun working with different cultures, and having said you don't need to change things from each market. You don't have to change much, but you do have to make some changes in each market, and I really enjoy that, and figuring out how you make teams from around the world kind of work together, interesting, and manage different cultures. I'd always see at Tough Mudder that the different teams always want to tell you about different things. The Americans always want to tell you about how hard they've been working. The English always want to tell you about a really clever thing they've done. The Germans would always want to tell you about the thing they've made better, and the Australians would always want to tell you about the new thing. It's funny how it goes, but it's that's all. I enjoy that part of it. It's challenging at times, and it's when we hired our general manager in Dallas, I sent him an email, and I said, "Look, it's what Brits say and what Brits really mean, and so of course there are challenges that kind of come with that. When a Brit says something's quite good, they mean it's a bit good. When what an American hears is, I think that's really good,
right?
There's a million and one examples of that. I used to. My wife, she's American, and she said, "Oh, you look quite nice." And I was like, eventually one day I was just, I've had enough of this. What is wrong with how I look?
That's great. I think I need that cheat sheet, if you can send that to me too.
It's out there on the internet as well, doing the rounds.
Yeah, that's fair. I can just Google.
Yeah.
So the next question is just about future locations. You're thinking big here. Do you think every electric game box is the same size, same amount of rooms? What makes a perfect site for you? And does it change at all?
And truth be told, we're still figuring it out a little. Just take our locations in the UK. They're in very very different spaces. The one in central London, it's very convenient in terms of where it is. It's right in the middle of town. It's very near the Tate Modern, the famous galleries in London, near the major stations, like London Waterloo. But the street it's on is really quiet, and so it's near stuff, but you don't really get very much foot traffic. And so that does great for us, but it's all pre-booked. We see a Grandscape, which is our location in Dallas, so when we initially started getting a lot of walk-up traffic, particularly at weekends, and now we're getting busier. It's more pre-booked because we're sold out a lot of the time.
Yeah.
The aspiration, of course, is to be not just in the top 30 markets in the US, but the top 100 markets in the US. I saw a lot of businesses in the immersive entertainment space that were designed to work in New York and LA. and maybe London and Tokyo, right? And not many other places in between, because it's a high price or it's operationally complicated or whatever it is. And we didn't want to be in that market. We wanted to build something that we felt had mass appeal, not just because that's good for business, but because for me personally, I want to feel like I'm creating a product that's impacting in a positive way millions of people. So in terms of the location, obviously what we're doing with Brookfield is largely malls. That's a mix of urban and more suburban locations, and we'll learn a lot from that. Typically, we're looking for about 2,500 to 3,000 square feet, and that will allow you to have somewhere in the region of 8 to 12 game boxes on site. We're also doing some experimentation, so with the concession model. So we're going to announce the next month or so a partnership where we're putting in some of our game boxes into a movie theater chain in the US, which is cool. So and that's an experiment for us as well as them to see how that does. But and of course we don't think that big markets will only have to have one location. I mean, in London we already have two, and they're very different locations. One is very much in the city centre, does very well with the after-work crowd, all of young urban professionals, as you might imagine, in central London. And then the one that's more on the outskirts, like a lot more families, it's slightly different demographics. So look, we're still figuring it out. We're not exclusive to Brookfield either. We're doing some partnerships with other malls as well, but we're also doing a lot of urban stuff. So our COO is in Chicago as we speak right now, looking at a bunch of urban locations there. So we're looking to do some kind of city centre locations as well as kind of suburban locations, and we'll do some concessions. And of course, in doing lots of things and moving quickly, you'll do some things that will work better than others, and that's okay. Right? That's fine. In fact, I keep telling the team, remember, it's only a failure if we don't learn from it. That's the only problem here, and because these are not bet the farm bets, like with each location, and we're very fortunate that the economics on the sites are good, so we can afford to experiment.
Yeah, that's great that you're so open to trying new things. I am realizing we are running a little short on time here, so I'm going to skip forward a bit. One question I've been itching to ask, though, is F&B. So we were previously talking, or you were commenting on how it's like food and beverage is the only option out there, when you think of an entertainment space. But I think that's also the case for a reason. People do often seem to want to eat and drink while they're doing an activity, and you think of like Putt Shack, you think of Topgolf, you think of activity-based concepts, and they usually do have some F&B component to it. And I'm sure that this has been something that you guys have talked through. I'm wondering what are your thoughts on all of that? Is it something you might introduce in the future, or it's just not something you want to do as a focal point?
So never say never. I think one of the things that we observed a lot when we were going into shopping malls was there's so many great options already on site, and what we saw was people would come to our location, and then everyone would want to go for food afterwards. And when we were doing the deal with Brookfield, the fact that we could say, look, half of all the people coming to our location had never been to this mall before, ever. And 95% of people are then sticking around afterwards to get the food and beverage. And that was super powerful. And we'd never say never, but I think one of the things that was appealing to a Brookfield is they could see that all of their other tenants would be excited to be in there. We're in Essex, we're literally next door to a Putt Shack. You mentioned Putt Shack. I mean, they're our next door neighbour, and what we see, of course, is families come for the day and they go to Electric Gamebox and have a fun time, and they go to Putt Shack and they play mini golf and they eat. And we have no problem with that. I think our focus is on moving fast. We believe we've got to get to scale quite quickly. We think having distribution is very important. And what we've seen is that people don't have to. They're coming to us for 30 minutes an hour, and then they're going somewhere else, as part of a wider experience. And maybe they're doing some shopping and things as well as part of that. So it's a mix. So never say never. One of the big differences we see, and I view this from Tough Mudder as well, is that Americans buy a lot more merch than Europeans. Don't ask me why, but you guys do. So, and it's something we get asked a lot. Why do you not have merch? And, we will be adding that in to adding that into the mix, right? It's a cliche, but you're going to do the experience, you've got to get the t-shirts as well. And so never say never. And, we're certainly looking at that, the context of private parties in particular, corporate groups that want to book out the whole space. But there are downsides to doing F&B as well, right? You've got a lot more inventory, needing space. You have to worry about teenagers sneaking in with fake IDs, all that stuff.
Gotcha. So, as VR technology advances into the future, do you think? Do you worry at all about this becoming a trend? Where people come, they try it out, they think it's cool, but then maybe they're on to the next thing or anything like that. How are you anticipating staying ahead of those trends and making it, a easy answer for any evening out on a recurring basis? Yeah.
It's I think the people ask about the fad concern, and obviously the pace of change in business is faster than it's ever been, and that's particularly true in technology. Look, I think one of the things we look at is say, look, the basics of what we're doing. You're in a room with your friends playing a game where you're having to interact with the room. That we believe is here to stay. If you look at a console today, like a PlayStation or an Xbox, it actually looks pretty similar to a console from the 1980s. Right? Of course, it has better graphics and better sound, and it's connected to the internet, but at its core, you've got a box connected to a TV, right? And you've got a controller in your hands, and that stuff. The fundamentals haven't changed, right? People still watch TV, right? Yeah. And yes, it's different from TV in the 1950s, right? But it's got a lot in common as well. And we, at least in terms of the hardware, and the content changes, of course. Right? The content always changes. And we will continue to add new things to the space as new technologies come out. That's a given. Yeah. But at its core, one of the things I saw a lot with VR, but also with some of these other experiences like escape rooms or the Instagram museums, like Museum of Ice Cream, is they're by definition once and done. And one of the things that I'm most proud of and encouraged by is the fact that we're seeing 20% of people coming back within a month. And I think if you can get that right, the basic human need to do things outside of the house, as a group, that hasn't gone away. It's of course, people will always want to go out and eat in restaurants, and tastes change over time, but the basics of sit together around a table and talk to one another, that's pretty universal, and that's been there for a while. And we think we're tapping into something pretty fundamental in that regard. So you've got to keep an eye out for the next thing, and there's always the next thing. Right. But I don't think, I genuinely don't worry that location-based VR is going to be the thing, because I think we're still a very long time away from being at a place where when I put that headset on, I still feel like I'm with my friends. And I think that's one of the big problems of VR.
Yeah. Well, I'll move on to the last question just because we are at time. But what knowledge would you want to impart to other entrepreneurs and new concepts that are starting within location-based entertainment? Like you're going somewhere, that kind of entertainment.
Yeah, I think, well, there's a lot I could say, right? Having spent the last 15 years of my life as an entrepreneur, I think, and some of this might end up sounding a bit sort of cliche, but like most cliches, they're cliches for a reason. They happen to be true. It's the first thing I tell people is when you're up, it's never as good as you think it's going to be, and when you're down, it's never quite as bad as you think it's as you think it is, right? And the journeys of being an entrepreneur and building something, right? You know, the highs are high and the lows are low, and keeping perspective. When it's your career, when it's your money, when it's your everything on the line, can be a challenge. But I always remind people that resilience is is a huge part of it. Right? If you look at success in anything in life, not just as an entrepreneur, as an athlete, in a creative field, but over and above a certain level, like talent and intelligence isn't the thing that gets you there, right? It's being able to grit it out and trying to remember that every time you go through something hard, this pandemic we just went through, right? Everyone who ever built anything worthwhile, or frankly did anything worthwhile in this world, has had these moments of feeling lonely, feeling low, questioning themselves. I think that's the thing I'd say. I think specifically to the space, the great news is, right, it's a boom space, right? Where the world is now re-emerging from its home, and after a year of everyone being forced to work remotely, and one of the supreme ironies for me is that all of Zoom London, the Zoom team in London, are all coming to us for their team bonding in September. Right? I mean, that tells you kind of all you need to know, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has to get together sometime, right? Even the people that have been facilitating digital communication for a year, and it's a huge growing space. And if you're selling cars, right, the truth is, if someone buys another car, not buying your brand of car, right? There are 52 weekends in the year, right? There are 365 days of the year, right? That's a lot of times to bring people in. And I don't think of Putchak as a competitor; it's a complement to what we're doing, right? Success for us is not someone comes to us twice a week, right? Nor is it that they're playing, I'm sure for Putchak, that they're playing mini golf twice a week. It's that people are getting out of the house and doing things as a group. And in that way, right, we are truly a complement, and a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think when you look at this space, the cool thing about it is twofold. First of all, it's growing. There's loads of innovation happening. And the second one is, okay, I said it before, we may not be curing cancer, but we are making, in our own way, the world a better place, right? Time spent together, particularly after the year we've all just had, is really valuable. So don't lose sight of that mission, right? Because it's important, and you are making people's lives a little bit better. And that's a really worthwhile thing, and not a lot of people get to say that. So if you're building something that's achieving that, you'd be pretty proud of yourself.
That's awesome. Well, Will, thank you so much for your generous, just being generous with your time. I know we are
of course, this was fun. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Well,
yeah, of course.
Normally we would do a Q&A with the audience, but unfortunately we are, a bit over. So I'll call it here, and if anybody's interested in asking more questions, feel free to send a note, and we'll do our best to get you connected with Will if those are questions for him. So, of
course.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm happy to help anyway. Well, look, thank you again for having me on. This was really fun.
Yeah.
And to everyone who's watching, come check us out. And as thanks to the great team at RK Murray, there's going to be many electric game boxes all over the US in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I'm excited to go to one myself. Have
Cool.
a good one, Will.
All right.
Thank you so much
You
again.
too. Thank you for having me. Cheers. Bye now.
Take care.